Життя – це шлях. Для кожного свій. Із чого складається шлях тих, хто визначив для себе сенс буття? Чи може їхній приклад допомогти змінитися нам? Дізнайся, яким шляхом ідуть герої нашої програми, і ти зможеш іти своїм. Інший вимір звичайного.
Його святість Шріла Ніранджана Свамі, видатний релігійний діяч і проповідник. Саньясі, член керівної ради Міжнародного товариства свідомості Крішни. Курує діяльність Міжнародного товариства свідомості Крішни в Україні, Білорусі, Молдові, Литві, частково в Росії. Народився 10 грудня 1952 року в місті Лоуелл, штат Масачусетс, Сполучені Штати Америки. Після закінчення школи вивчився на теслера і якийсь час працював в цій галузі. 1972 року придбав книгу Бхагавад-гіта «Як вона є», після чого продовжив дослідження філософії вайшнавів. У 1973 році переїхав жити в Бостонський ашрам, прийнявши чернечий спосіб життя. Перші роки як кришнаїтський монах-послушник займався розповсюдженням вайшнавської духовної літератури в Сполучених Штатах. Через кілька місяців отримав посвячення в брахмани. 1986 року отримав посвячення в саньясу та титул свамі. У 1987 році був обраний членом керівної ради Міжнародного товариства свідомості Крішни. З того часу активно подорожує і проповідує. Російською мовою вийшли в світ його книги, збірники листів і лекцій, такі як книга лекцій з Чайтання Чарітамріти, книга лекцій з Чайтання Бхагавати, милість в настановах, аналогії для проповіді, листи моїм учням і доброзичливцям. Здравствуйте, уважаемый Ниранджана Swami. Я очень рада вас приветствовать в этой стране и в этой студии.
Thank you. Very happy to be here too.
When we were thinking about this program, we wanted to, we put as our aim to achieve the clear air so that everyone could choose for themselves whatever they want. So we'll discuss here your tradition. The main purpose of our meeting here is to familiarize those people who will see us on the TV with many different ways and paths that there are. As far as I can understand, you're in charge of Krishna consciousness movement here in Ukraine, also in Moldova, and partially in Russia. At the same time, you're quite young. The main question that I wanted to ask you is, what was that question that made you, as a young child or youth, to step on this path and to try to follow this tradition? Who am I, or what is this world? What should I do here? What was that original question?
Well, I was a searcher. I was definitely interested in different types of philosophies. I was a university student at the University of Massachusetts in America, and I was an engineering major. But I didn't find so much interest in it, and I spent most of my time dabbling with different types of philosophy, specifically Eastern philosophy. And I actually left the university in 1972, beginning of 1972. And I started studying even more philosophy. And also I was part of the so-called hippie culture of America at that time. And because the hippie culture was very popular at that time, one of the primary components of the hippie culture was to look for an alternative way to live. Because hippies didn't want to follow the normal course of life that was laid out for us by our previous generation. So with that background behind me, when I started studying philosophy, I started looking for philosophy that would be consistent with a way of living. Because I didn't want just a philosophy to satisfy my mind, but I wanted a philosophy that could satisfy my whole being. And therefore I started reading many different types of philosophies. But somehow when I read Bhagavad Gita as it is, that had the deepest impact on me. And that was the book that was written by my spiritual master, and I studied it very intensely in 1972. And so that was my search, was searching for an alternate way to live rather than what was being laid out before me by modern society at that time. And the hippie culture didn't satisfy me either, even though I had experimented with it and really immersed myself into it as well. Externally, I had all the trappings of a hippie. I had very long hair, and I had many hippie friends, and we lived in a hippie community.
Но хиппи была достаточно бунтарская культура.
Yes, somewhat rebellious. We were rebelling against society, rebelling against authority, but not violent. It was peace.
Yes, but after that rebellious type of culture, hippie culture, you choose this very humble culture of service.
Yes.
Completely different culture. So if I'm not mistaken, this culture is the culture of surrender to God, the culture of humility and total dependence upon God.
That's correct. So you're questioning basically how is it that I went from hippie to a devoted person, a person devoted to service to God.
Нет, я хочу спросить.
No, I want to ask you where that rebellious nature goes. It disappears or what? Because after that rebellious nature, you become very humble.
Uh-huh. Well, that rebellious nature definitely was the catalyst that turned me to search for Krishna. But it was completely pacified in the example of my spiritual teacher. Because I finally found somebody who was genuine. Somebody I could actually accept and surrender to. And my rebellious nature just completely dissipated.
Она исчезает, но это же не есть насильное подавление, а это
So it is not a forceful pressure that you have to overcome your ego, your nature, in order to become humble and give up that rebellious spirit. How does it happen?
In the beginning, one has to exert some force, definitely. But not a force from outside, but internal force. One has to restrain oneself from certain tendencies. But our spiritual life is not based on simple restraint. And that's where I got extra strength that took me beyond that level of simple restraint to actually become humble. Because my spiritual master didn't force me in any way. He actually always saw with it be the individuality and to make my own choices. I never forced anything on me.
А потом это происходит, это просто трансформация личности, да, то есть по сути мы ничего насильно из себя не выдавливаем, у нас просто не возникает больше амбиций, бунта.
So, in other words, those different passions that we have in our material world, like greed, anger, and etc., they do not appear in your heart. Is it correct?
No, that's not correct. I definitely went through a period of transformation that happened over time. And to say that they immediately disappeared 42 years ago when I started, I'm not that young, I'm 62.
Ну, вы выглядите.
Мне уже 62.
Ну, вы выглядите.
You look young.
A lot of people think I'm younger than I am.
Это к этому приводит здоровый образ жизни, это внутреннее свечение.
I believe it has something to do with the way that I live. It has to do with the transformation that I experienced over 42 years. And which is still taking place.
Но когда вы говорите о здоровом образе жизни, вы же говорите не только там о том, что вы не едите там мясо, не употребляете тяжелых продуктов.
When we speak about healthy way of life, we do not mean only the fact that you do not take meat, you do not eat meat, or you do not take intoxications, but we also mean that you don't have those ambitions for social prestige and anger, greed, and all the other things that we see in our social dealings. Am I correct here?
Yes, that's very much correct. That also contributes to health because that's what gives not only it gives the wholesome life, which is consistent not only with the physical body but with the self, the spirit, soul. Because the essence of spiritual life is the self has to feel satisfaction, and until the self feels satisfaction, the body can't experience full satisfaction. But when the self feels satisfaction, then the need to satisfy the demands of the body automatically decreases. And the result is peace. That's something that's very valuable that everybody's looking for.
The soul can be satisfied only when the soul strives for something higher, and he cannot be satisfied by living in the secular world.
Yes, that's correct.
So the soul cannot be satisfied by our material life. The soul has to have some spiritual life. And am I correct in understanding you properly that you mean here that the soul has to find some higher purpose in our life?
Yes, every living being needs to experience a higher purpose and actually have a higher connection with the Supreme. That's the essence of spiritual life. A materialistic life is a life to try to extract satisfaction from and by making our connections in the temporary world. But by nature, the living being is meant to be connected to someone. It's our constitutional nature. So we have to understand to whom should we connect. So you can call it a higher connection with a higher goal, a purpose in life. We call him Krishna.
Krishna, the concept of Krishna, how much is it connected to the Christian conception of the Creator, God Creator? And Krishna, as far as I can understand, it is the only God, right?
Yes, that's correct. There's only one God. Just as there's only one sun in the sky. It's not the Ukrainian sun, nor is it the American sun. It's the sun.
So it is in many ways analogous to the Christian concept of God the Creator and God the Savior. As far as I can understand, there is a concept of Krishna.
Yes, these are different aspects of God as creator and maintainer and destroyer. But he actually even has more than that.
No,
His creation, maintenance, and destruction are only have God in relationship to this temporary world. But who is that God who's eternal, who existed before this world if he's the creator? And what does he do when he's not creating? That is the person with whom we actually try to establish our connection with.
we understand this concept of God as a personality, as a separate personality, or we also understand ourselves as a part of this personality.
We understand that God is an eternally separate personality. And we are also eternal individuals who have separate personality. And never was there a time when we did not exist, nor in the future will any of us cease to be. So although God is an eternal separate personality, and we are eternal separate personality, this world is also one of his separated energies. But the difference is that this material world is temporary and the soul is eternal. Therefore, I must have an eternal relationship with God.
А цель нашего пребывания здесь, во временном мире, это установление вот этих отношений или...
What is the purpose of our being here in this material world? Should we realize God, or should we realize ourselves?
Well, if we want to realize ourselves, first we have to know who is God. Just like if it's complete darkness, if we have to see ourselves, our reflection in the mirror, first we have to see the sun. And when one sees the sun and the presence of the sun in the sky, then everything else becomes knowable or can be seen by the presence of the sun. So similarly, when we know who is God, we can also know who we are. Not only myself, but I also can see everyone else as to who they are. And that is transcendental knowledge, which can only be revealed by God. It's not academic knowledge. It's not a matter of simply studying books and memorizing verses.
It is not written in the Bhagavad Gita, it exists inside.
Yeah, it is written in Bhagavad Gita, but it is revealed inside. There's two types of knowledge. They're called jnana and vijnana. Jnana is theoretical knowledge. It's knowledge, it's truth. But vijnana is realized knowledge. So it's not a question of simply theoretically understanding I'm spirit and theoretically understanding that God exists. But it has to be revealed within the heart. And when we try to understand God and make our efforts to understand him, then he helps us from within by revealing himself to us within our hearts. So self-realization is a natural byproduct of trying to know who is God, because he becomes very pleased by our efforts to want to know him.
As far as I could understand, when we try to realize ourselves, we become focused on ourselves, and it is kind of selfish to be so much focused on oneself. So does it mean that we have also to, as I understood it usually, our internal connection between different souls, this is the real connection. For instance, we take part in this creation of the material world because the world is being created even now. Am I correct?
Yes, definitely oneness. But there's also a difference. And complete knowledge means to know the oneness and the difference. Because many people will simply try to understand the oneness. And in their attempt to understand the oneness, they try to negate the existence of God by saying that we are all God. But actually, your question before was, is God an eternal, separate individual? So we have to understand how we're part of God. But the fundamental difference between us and God is, he is always God and we're never God. Because God is more than the sum of his parts.
What is the ultimate aim of our existence here? Is it the merging into the existence of God, or what?
Well, everybody has a choice of what they want to strive for, because that choice is also given to us by God. God doesn't force us to surrender to him. So some living beings may try to liberate themselves from the entanglement of this temporary world and to merge into the totality of oneness. Many people being frustrated with the way of life, materialistic life, they want to give up their individuality. And they think that a better state of existence is to not exist. Because if I don't exist, then I won't know I'm suffering. And that will be my happiness. To not suffer, they think is their happiness. So such persons will choose to try to merge into the totality. But there's something higher. And that's what we try to share. Then a higher purpose of life is not simply to become free from suffering, because that's still selfish. To say, I don't want to suffer is selfish. But there's something much higher than that, and that is, I want to please God. And when one actually aspires for that relationship with God, then a natural byproduct, which he doesn't even aspire for, comes automatically, that he becomes happy.
Is that concept of happiness that we have here in this material world, when we usually say that there is a happiness and there is distress, and we know what is happiness by knowing what is distress, is it applicable to your situation, or you are in a kind of different situation and you do not see those the duality of happiness and distress?
Myself personally, I definitely can experience the difference between real happiness and temporary happiness. And because I experience the difference between real happiness and temporary happiness, it gives me the impetus to always go beyond the temporary relief of sufferings of this world. And my experience of that happiness is because I experience it coming from Krishna, that Krishna wants to share that happiness with me. So I can't tell it to go away. If he wants to give me that happiness, I can't say, no, I don't want it. It's his desire. He is the ultimate decision maker. And because I've experienced that in my life, I know there's something higher. Just like when a person is eating, will food taste good? You know it tastes good. You don't have to ask somebody else, does this taste good? With each bite, you know.
Ну, лично вы, ведь еще понятие вот обычных человеческих эмоций, оно еще применимо к человеку, который находится в таком состоянии, на такой стадии пути, как вы?
Do you sometimes feel anger or disappointment, frustration, all those emotions, positive and negative emotions that usual ordinary people feel, or you are in a transcendental position when you do not feel such emotions at all?
No, I don't claim to be in such a transcendental platform beyond the experience of temporary emotions. They come, but it's just, they come and they go very quickly, and they do not disturb me. Just like when rivers enter into an ocean, the ocean remains steady because the ocean is already full. So in the same way, these desires may come and these emotions may come. But if we keep ourselves full with Krishna consciousness, they will not influence us.
Ведь путь, который, механический путь.
As far as I can understand, your practice is mainly that you chant mantras, and with that chanting you try to avoid all those different emotions that we feel here in this mundane secular world. Am I correct in this understanding or not?
Chanting of the mantras is definitely a very integral part of my life. But as far as restraining myself from these emotions, it's not something that I have to I'm perpetually forced to do. Because spiritual life is not devoid of emotions. It's not that we simply become mindless robots and have no emotion, no feeling.
Я понимаю, я говорю, это другое качество, которое наступает эмоционально. То есть вы способны испытывать те же эмоции, но вы не...
My understanding of this is that I do not want to say that spiritual life is devoid of emotions. I can understand that, but those emotions are different by nature, and I can say, correct me if I am wrong, that you are not controlled by your emotions, but you control your emotions. And that is the real happiness, which consists of trying to achieve some higher goal. Am I correct in this understanding?
Yes, that's correct, but it's almost correct.
Где вот в чем это слово почти?
Almost, because it's not that I have to control my emotions. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that the embodied soul may restrict himself from these types of experiences, even though the taste to experience these emotions may still remain. But ceasing these engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he becomes fixed in consciousness. So it's the higher pleasure that enables me to restrain myself from emotions, mundane emotions.
Yeah.
And that higher pleasure, that higher experience comes from chanting. It comes from speaking about Krishna. It comes from hearing about Krishna. And it comes from remembering him. And therefore it's, I said almost, because it's not just that I have to restrain myself from these emotions. I have help. And I'm always dependent on that help.
What was the main turning point in your life to become Hare Krishna devotee? As far as I could understand, it was the Bhagavad Gita who changed your life, because you understood that teachings of Bhagavad Gita is the complete and perfect teachings that you can live. Did you ever have a chance to use all that knowledge that you received in your university studies or not?
Well, the first question was about
Turning point.
turning point, yes. So the turning point really came when I read Bhagavad Gita. I actually dropped out of college. I was a plotnik, carpenter. And I became a carpenter. I used to build houses.
Руками.
Yes, I was more interested in using my hands and using my mind for studying philosophy rather than studying engineering. And so therefore I read Bhagavad Gita as it is by my spiritual master very religiously every night when I came home from work. But when I finished Bhagavad Gita, I thought about it and I was thinking, I don't think I'm ready to accept this. That's how I was thinking when I finished. But I can tell you what happened. I tried to put the book away on the shelf and forget about it. But I couldn't forget, because my whole perspective of the world and everything around me and the relationships I had at that time was completely changed. Even the girlfriend that I was with, we had aspirations to be married. She saw all these changes taking place. And I said, why don't you come with me? And she said, because I don't want to be number two. And I can see that Krishna is number one in your life
And
now.
the girlfriend did not come to you after that?
I never saw her again.
Ужас какой. Но никогда об этом не жалели.
We are speaking here about the authentic text of Bhagavad Gita, or because you said Bhagavad Gita by my spiritual master, Bhagavad Gita as it is by my spiritual master. So it was written by your spiritual master, or it was translated by your spiritual
It's
master?
translated by my spiritual master, but he gave his commentaries. And I had read other versions of Bhagavad Gita before that. But this didn't affect me in the same way as my spiritual master's Bhagavad Gita.
А можно вычленить это?
What is the main difference, if we can extract that?
The main difference is my spiritual master was completely following Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita, and therefore he was able to present it objectively. Because the essence of Bhagavad Gita's teachings is that one has to surrender himself fully to God. Therefore, he was able to internalize the teachings of Bhagavad Gita and fully realize it, and he was able to impress that realization into the hearts of others. Because he didn't
Taking instructions or being under the care of spiritual master, should we surrender completely ourselves into the hands of the spiritual master, and he will teach us to interpret the texts, the religious texts properly, and does he deals with us on a personal basis, or what?
Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, never encouraged blind faith, to simply blindly follow him without first trying to understand what he's trying to teach us. And therefore, although he taught us that one ultimately has to surrender, he was very personal in his dealings with his followers and understanding each individual's capacity to surrender. Because surrender can be very bitter medicine. But just like if you go into a pharmacy and you need medicine for some disease, it's not that there's one medicine and just everybody goes in and buys the same medicine and just takes it and they're cured. The medicine has to be prescribed according to the severity of the disease. And the spiritual master is one who knows how to prescribe the medicine according to the disease of each of his patients.
Being here in this world is a disease.
It's disease. Yes, it's a diseased condition of life. We're not in our natural state of health.
But this disease has been
Yes.
Но решить выздороветь — это все равно выбор за мной, да? Или это, ну, то есть я могу там принять это решение или не принять это решение. Точка выбора все равно во мне, да? Выбор.
But it is me who makes that decision that I want to become healthy, right?
Yes. Has to be. Unless we make the decision, how can we actually make progress? Because bhakti means voluntary. Love is voluntary. Like nobody can put a gun to your head and say, love me.
There are some technologies to do that. When a man gets used to something, he develops some love, and he can do that for a long time from that day on. So by practicing different mantras and by your spiritual practice, you also can change your attitude and fall in love with whomever you want to fall in love with.
But that's not love. Love is two ways. Love is not one way. Love is reciprocal.
We can forcefully transform ourselves and we can force ourselves to do that which we originally didn't want to do.
Yes, but that doesn't mean it's love.
When you have a diet and you eat food which you originally didn't like, but after some time you start liking that food, you feel it's kind of nice. And in the same way, you can love somebody even if you originally didn't want to love him. And we can see that many people actually, they come to the churches or to your temples and they come to God because they suffered so much and they experienced so much pain that they cannot bear that anymore and they want to get rid of that. So is it the possible way to come, or you have to really get that love and love God from the very beginning?
No, that's the way to come. Different types of people will come to God. One of them is those who are in distress, those who are in need of money, those who are inquisitive, and another is those who are wise. However one comes to God doesn't make any difference. But a person who comes to God for relief from distress won't get the full mercy of God because they want relief from distress. So when they get the relief from distress, they think, oh, this is nice. And they may not keep their connection with God anymore because their distress is gone. So although a person may be initially motivated to come to God because they want relief from distress, they have to meet the pure devotee who can show them there's something higher than relief from distress.
We make that decision to suffer or not.
We've made the decision before. In previous life, we may have committed certain activities and we have to suffer for them in this life. And if one simply tries to counteract suffering in this life, then they create more suffering for next life. Because there's more to life than counteracting suffering. So yes, choice is there. Always is there.
Я немножко не это имела в виду. Я имела в виду такие примеры, как, например, Ник Вукчич, который...
I meant something different. I was trying to say that a man can choose whether to suffer or not, just like that person who didn't have his hands and legs were cut off, and he could very easily be depressed and start suffering, but he didn't feel any sufferings, and actually he was helping others to overcome their sufferings. For instance, we are sitting here and I can choose whether I suffer from this bright light or I can feel happiness by talking to you. So I have that kind of choice that I was thinking of.
Yes, so choice is always there.
И таким же должно быть решение личное мое, ну, личности.
In the same way, I can choose whether to love or not to love, and that choice is with me always. Because the God is love, and it is accepted in all the religious traditions in this world, and I can choose whether I can be happy with God by loving Him, or I can choose to hate everyone around me, and by that not being happy at all. That choice is with me, right?
But to know what is real love, that can only be revealed. Choose what we think is love. But in order to know what is real love, we can only know. It's just as I said, there's theoretical knowledge and there's realized knowledge. Theoretical love and there's realized love. But the choice is always there.
Осознанная любовь — это истина.
Realized love is the love that we apply in our lives, right?
Realized love is the love that's consistent with the way we live, yes.
Действие. Любовь — это еще движение навстречу кому-то, да? Это
Activity towards others, towards God, towards those people who surround us. Am I correct?
Love is first, when it's towards God, then we can actually express that love towards others. Then we can really love.
From your experience, can you tell us how many percent of people come to God because of love?
Because they experienced love?
Ну, да, из любви к Богу.
Not many.
Вот,
When you joined this Krishna consciousness movement, it was hippie culture, and but the times they have changed now. And what inspires people to join now?
I'd say that many people are, although there's people who are not part of the hippie culture, people are still looking for some alternative to life. That's the nature of a living being. They're always looking for something better.
хиппи бунтовали против того, как им...
There is no more that rebellious movements like hippie culture, but still we can see that there are many people in this world who are successful from the social point of view, and still they practice yoga, they try to learn something about Oriental movements or religions, Eastern religions, and they read Bhagavad Gita. And this is it may be not the main point in their lives.
Again, because people are looking for a more wholesome way to live, because just their material success is not sufficient to satisfy themselves. I meet many people like this all over the world, very successful materially, but empty. And they're looking for something to fill that vacuum.
This vacuum can be only filled with that thing that you are feeling, that you are practicing. Otherwise, I do not see any other way to fill that vacuum.
Is that her objective statement, or is that she's suggesting that that's my statement?
Are there any alternatives? What can we find here in order to fill that vacuum?
Well, many people can find things to fill that vacuum. That's the problem.
И они это чувствуют.
They can feel that. They may have to go through some bad experiences before they come to realize that. Because again, we can't force people to say you have to fill yourself with this. We can only attract by our words, by our example.
We can offer just like children are offered.
Yes.
Что бы вы поменяли, может быть, в системе, вот лично вы, чего не хватает, почему возникает эта пустота? Ведь на самом деле это же можно воспитывать с детства. Можно предложить варианты пути, но с детства можно учить любить. Чего-то же не хватает в системе, я сейчас имею в виду там не Америку или не Россию.
What is lacking in our upbringing, in our system, way of life, because that vacuum could be actually filled in a proper way from the very beginning of life. We can teach people from the very beginning that you can fill this only with this. So why it is not being done in that way?
Well, we have to look what's lacking. And what's lacking all over the world is real love. So therefore, we're trying to introduce what is real love, introduce the real object of that love. Otherwise, there's nothing else that's really lacking in this world.
I know that in your Krishna consciousness movement you have your own schools, and in what ways they are different from the ordinary schools in this world, what you are adding there?
We're attempting to add that missing ingredient, and by teaching the children right from the very beginning of life how to love God. Child imitates, but just as a child is, if you're teaching a child how to learn to walk, and a child at a certain age has a natural propensity for walking, but still the child has to practice. It's not artificial for the child to walk. He's not forcing something artificial upon himself by attempting to walk. In the same way, every living being has a natural propensity to love God. So right from the very beginning of life, they're being taught how to love God. And living beings who are highly evolved from a previous birth are taking birth and getting that opportunity to learn how to do that from the beginning of their life. And every parent, even before conceiving a child, is conscious that they're looking for such a soul. They're praying, please, send a soul into our lives who is eager to learn how to love God.
Конечная цель пребывания нашего на этой земле.
Is this wheel of samsara reincarnation endless, or there is some point that we can leave it and get liberated?
It is not endless. One can actually become free from the repetition of birth and death. Spiritual Master used to teach us this point. He used to tell us to make this your last life. I was just listening to him speak that point this morning when I was listening to a recording of one of his talks in 1977. He was appealing to us, make this your last life. And he taught us, this was 1977, the year he departed. He taught us how to leave this world in full consciousness of Krishna.
Do you have that desire that your life is the last life that you have in this material world?
I have that desire, but I have a desire also to do something that's pleasing to my spiritual master. I'm so grateful to him for what he's given me in this life. And if he asks me to come back again, I'll be happy to do it.
In order to make the decision to come or not to come, to be happy to come again, come back again or not, you have to be spiritually developed, advanced, on a high level, because mostly people do not have that option, that decision, that choice.
That's true.
What should a person do in order to have that possibility to make that decision?
I don't know if my level of achievement is something that can be given as an option for people. They have to decide for themselves if my level of achievement based on knowing me is something worthy for aspiring for. It's not for me to label. My level of achievement is not for me to label. But if they actually want to come to that point, they have to be highly evolved.
Я имела в виду скорее, ведь как взрослому человеку видно уровень развития, на котором находится ребенок, да, то есть в любом, там, кто выше, всегда видно, что там, что снизу. Ведь вы наверняка видите, кто как практикует, вы наверняка видите, как двигаются ваши последователи, ваши ученики.
You from your advanced level can see all those who are below that level, like your followers, your disciples. You can see their progress, how they are advancing in spiritual life, and that's why I'm asking that question. In order to achieve that point when we can make the decision to come back or not come back, we should achieve that level, or an ordinary person who is not spiritually inclined, but he is pious and he is very moral, can he have that choice?
No, he cannot have that option. He has to accept the decisions by the higher authorities as to where he'll go in his next life.
Просто есть специальная практика для того, чтобы осознанно и чисто уйти из этой жизни, или это все равно происходит, независимо от нашей воли. То есть это, в тибетской книге мертвых есть какие-то литературные источники, которые говорят о том, что то, что с нами происходит по ту сторону жизни, есть очень часто иллюзии нашего ума.
Are there any practices that involve consciousness in order to live in full consciousness, or it happens automatically when we achieve some higher level of advancement?
Well, to live in full consciousness means to live in complete Krishna consciousness, which just means completely conscious of our relationship with Krishna. But one may not be in full consciousness, but can still live at certain auspicious times, or certain auspicious places, to leave his body, and still achieve a higher destination, from which he can move forward in achieve even higher destinations in his life afterwards. So there are auspicious times, and there are auspicious places, and auspicious consciousness that one can achieve, which may not be full Krishna consciousness, which enables the soul to achieve higher destinations.
What happens if the soul does not take another birth? Does the soul merge into some higher existence, or what?
Well, to not take another birth means that he's liberated. And there are different types of liberation. One type of liberation is merging into the impersonal aspect of the Supreme. But that liberation is not complete, because the natural state of existence for every spiritual being is to establish his connection with the Supreme Person. So his liberation remains incomplete, although he may be liberated in due course of time. He will fall down from that position because he failed to establish his eternal connection with Krishna.
And this process is endless?
This process is endless. It can be, but after one falls from that position, still one can achieve perfection and never have to take birth again.
Это совершенство есть любовь и установление этих отношений с Богом.
That is perfection. That is complete liberation. And that liberation is achieved by establishing our relationship with God as a servant. We have a particular conception of servant in this world that almost means it's comparable to the word slave. And people have fear of that, becoming a servant.
Но это социальное.
But there is another stage when everything else is useless and senseless.
Просто бессмысленно.
Yes. So a real servant
Да.
is one who realizes the complete fulfillment of all his desires. Whereas sometimes people think to serve means to give up my individuality. If I always have to serve the desires of somebody else, I can't think of my own personal need. Fear this concept of servant, but it's actually perfection.
Совершенство в том, что в том числе в неимении собственных желаний.
Am I right in my understanding that not to have personal desires is the perfection, and when those personal desires and ambitions they are no longer on the
Yes. It's in one sense to have no personal desires. If I could quote one verse that explains this point, the verse is Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Atayeva Shanta. Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakali Ashanta. That the Krishna Bhakta has no personal desires. Atayeva Shanta. Therefore he can be peaceful. Where Bhukti means somebody who wants to enjoy material pleasures. Mukti means somebody who wants liberation. He wants to become freed from his connections with this world. Siddhis are those who want mystic yogic perfections. But he's Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami means they still have some selfish desire. Sakali Ashanta, therefore they can never be peaceful. Why is a devotee peaceful? It doesn't mean because he has no desires. It means because all his desires are completely fulfilled. Doesn't mean no desire. All his desires are completely fulfilled.
А вы, вот лично вы,
when all your desires are completely fulfilled, what are the obligations that you have to perform in this world?
вы курируете сознание, общество сознания Кришны в достаточно большом
You
территориальном.
do so much. You are a leader of Krishna consciousness movement in such a big territory area, and you give lectures, you write books. So what else you have to do?
I have to please my spiritual master. And he wanted to give Krishna consciousness to everyone. And I cannot be satisfied until I've done what he wants me to do. That's what drives me. That's what moves me. It's what keeps me going in this world. Because he did everything to give Krishna consciousness to us. His very last breath. I have to do the same.
Но ведь вы сознание Кришны получил каждый, это обязательно вот общество сознания Кришны должно быть. Вы же признаете и другие.
What do you mean by saying Krishna consciousness? Because you acknowledge all other religions like Christianity and others, and there are different conceptions like enlightenment, Krishna consciousness. They are the same or not?
Krishna consciousness means to be completely conscious of our relationship with God. And God has many names. And Krishna is only one of them. Krishna is the name which means all attractive. So our message is just to look deeply within one's own tradition and to find that the essence is to love God. And if you can't find the means to love God within your own tradition, then maybe we can help.
I'm very grateful for this conversation with you.
И хочу на этом закончить, потому что это вещи.
And I would like to finish on this point because this is the point when one has to say thank you.
It was very kind of you, and I'm very grateful. I have to say thank you also.
Життя – це шлях. Для кожного свій. Із чого складається шлях тих, хто визначив для себе сенс буття? Чи може їхній приклад допомогти змінитися нам? Дізнайся, яким шляхом ідуть герої нашої програми, і ти зможеш іти своїм. Інший вимір звичайного.